All right, so now I'm going to get into medical marijuana. I want to go to, I'm not picking on you, Senate President Stivers. I really am not. But
looking around to why you're always looking at me.
The Kentucky Moms for Medical Cannabis co-founder Kristen Wilcox sent me a message today saying that she had met with, her group had met with you last week, I believe, and she felt that it went well.
I think Thursday or Friday.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there a chance, she wanted me to pass along, perhaps you all didn't get a chance for her to ask you this, is there a chance that the Senate will approve a medical cannabis bill?
Look, this to me is probably one of the most complex issues. And with Ms. Wilcox and group, I talked about this. I've seen family members go through cancer treatments. In no way do I want to be unsympathetic, because if you recall, in 2010, I walked off the Senate floor to have found out my mother had passed away from colon cancer. Now, I saw what she endured. I've seen what others have endured. My brother-in-law endured with glioblastoma. But there are also things out there that we want to make sure we do it the right way if it is done. Because and there was a misrepresentation, probably because of poor communications, that I was referencing Norton's overdose hotline. I was referencing that Norton's has an overdose hotline, but nationally there has been a substantial increase due to and related to marijuana use. And, so when you look at it, and I actually went to Denver, and I walked around kind of like undercover boss and started asking them, what do you do for a medical diagnosis, and how do you do that? And the person said, oh, well, we do it this. And I said, do you know about the recreational? Oh, we own both shops. So I found it interesting. And then there's actually an article that's come out in National Geographic. And there are indicators, and they're indicators, and see that, but it's not proven. And that's what's really difficult about this. There's indicators out there that certain things are helped. There are indicators that there are adverse consequences. And so until you get the research behind it, that we can, I heard everybody for 2 years say, let's follow the research. Let's listen to the research. Now nobody wants to pay attention to any research. So let's research the issue. It may be tough, but I also give people this one thing in the law that a lot of people don't realize. If you're sitting there in palliative care using THC, do you think the state police are going to come in, or the sheriff is going to come in and raid you? First of all, you've got a defense that has been around as long as Old English common law, a choice of evils. I don't, first of all, think you would be arrested, and two, I don't ever think you would be convicted if you're in those types of situations. But we want to make sure that it is not abused, because it does have adverse consequences. But I am working on it with others to try to figure out how we can get to a yes to take care of those individuals who are at end of life, who are needing of something of that nature that they think, even though it may be a placebo type of atmosphere, that it would help them.
Well, last year's bill that came from the House, it was pretty restrictive on the ailments that were approved for the use. So do you want even a more narrow scope?
I don't know about more narrow scope, but I think it would be good to look at a couple other alternatives. And I don't know if it was in the bill, but I'm actually have a meeting scheduled with some people who have processed this in other states. Should we have a Casper-style system for the prescribing of these, and what it is being prescribed for and the way it is being ingested? Because there's 50% more carcinogens in smoked marijuana than there is tobacco. Should we have full disclosure of who the individuals are that are actually the groups or business, or it's not going to be a pharmacy, because the pharmacists really don't want to touch it. So I really don't the distributors or dispensers as to who the owners are in those. And much like we do in ABC store or a liquor store, you have to disclose all owners. So we know just exactly how it is being done, that it's being reported, and it's not being abused.
You know, what the Senate President is saying, I can't argue against. You want to do it the right way, and I think you ought to look at it in a way that you can eliminate those things that would be negatives in doing so. But I think there's a lot of examples out there, and there's a lot of things that we can examine that will show us what it can do in this, that, or another situation, and we should get on with it, because we know that it is a benefit to a number of people who are in these situations where it relieves their pain or discomfort, et cetera. The question is making sure that it's not the abuse. I agree with that. But there are systems that are out there to do that. I don't think it's as complex as we might make it. And that bill that was out there is very restrictive, and more restrictive than I would think it should be, quite frankly. But I think we ought to at least go down that road. Let's examine that. Let's review it, and make changes as we go.
So your colleague, the House Speaker, David Osborne, said, well, it's the Senate's turn, okay, to start this. You feel the same way, Representative Meade?
Well, every time I've been on this show, we've had this discussion. And I have voted both ways on this bill. And I think, again, if it's tailored very specific, if the diagnoses are laid out, if we have the actual diagnosis from physicians in there, you probably see it would have a decent chance again. But the fact of the matter is we voted on this twice. It's passed the House twice, and I would stick with the Speaker's comments on that one.
Right. Okay. Any other comment about that? We know that Senator Yates has a bill that I believe is just marijuana. Straight up weed.
Well, you talk about Senator Yates, and I guess we can chuckle about all of that. But if you look at what's happening across the United States of America, if you look at what's happening in Canada, this thing is coming. And I will say this, too. On the federal level, you're going to see that it's going to be taken off of certain schedules, and it's going to be changed where it could be utilized. In fact, there's a couple of bills now in the House that have been filed by Representative Kirkconney related to, well, let the people decide. Let's make it a constitutional issue. Let's let them decide.
And decriminalizing, right?
Decriminalizing bills. The one's a statutory approach, and the other is let's let the people decide, and let's resolve this issue. But, it's a contentious issue. It's a contentious issue. It's got a lot of history behind it that's got us to where we are. And a lot of these things are mixed in terms of other types of drugs that are utilized historically in society. And now marijuana has been lumped in there. And some people believe it leads to the use of this, that, and the other. But then again, we got alcohol all over the place. We celebrate alcohol. Kentucky celebrates bourbon. We make a tremendous amount of money off of this. And I think we need to take a step back and we got to balance that somewhat. And I think we should go ahead and take a broader look, because the percentage of people, if you look at it, are really supportive of it.
Representative Graham.
I'll tell you a story. I had a constituent who brought his child to Kentucky. He was originally from the Northeast, and he found out about the school that was there in Frankfort for kids who have issues in terms of disability. And his son had major seizures. And he had a friend of his who lived out in Colorado. And so he decided to take his son out there for a week. And when he arrived in Colorado with his son, his friend gave his son a gummy bear. And in that gummy bear was obviously cannabis. For that whole week that child stayed out there, he had no seizures. And the father was just, completely so happy about it, because previously, a couple of months before that, he had so many seizures that he was told that it was becoming pretty dangerous for the child. And the fact of the matter that this particular gummy bear each day kept him from doing that. We know that there is evidence that can help in areas, in the medical areas, that cannabis has shown to be able to assist and help those who are having medical issues.
And seizures such as that, and I think that was included in House Bill 136, I think, from last time. Okay, go ahead.
You know, we kind of chuckled, but this is not a chuckling subject matter. It is difficult, as Senator Neal says. And for anybody to minimize the issue, and I'm not saying anybody is here, or think that we are minimizing the issue, I think is totally wrong, because I can tell you what I was doing at 9 o'clock Saturday. I was reading articles on this, reading studies, statistically significant indicators about spasticity. Those aren't words I use every day, but that's what investigators talk about. And I was reading articles and sending out emails about, get me people who can tell me about this, or about, you know, you get into nausea suppression, appetite enhancement, where there has been cancer treatments. You know, those are the things and I know I've become kind of the poster boy for this to throw darts at, but I think a lot of other people are in similarly situated circumstances that they want to figure out what the right thing to do. And there are statistically significant indicators, but is that the best way to do this? And everybody feels the gravity of the situation and are taking it very seriously, going through all the things we're doing, even on Saturday nights at 9 o'clock.
And I think Robert is right. The first time he spoke, he hit on the data issue, and we have a lot of members who are very data driven. They're in the healthcare industry, they're attorneys, whatever it may be, and they want to see all that data laid out and make sure that they're making the absolute right decision when it comes to this.
And let me just say this, if I will. When we function in the Senate, that's what I know most in terms of the House. The approaches are pretty studious. That's why I don't question. When we have debates or discussions about these matters, everybody's serious about this. We have difference of opinions sometimes, but actually most of the time we agree on the various issues that we deal with. But from the outside, people look at that and they interpret that a different sort of way. I just happen to feel that there's sufficient information to move forward on this particular issue. And because the Senate President or others in the Senate may think that that hasn't satisfied what they think is necessary, that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad.
So
in fact, I think the process is good because we can scrutinize it carefully instead of just jumping off a ledge.
So what about a constitutional amendment? What about what Representative Neal Kulkarni is proposing?
And I don't think the constitutional amendment is the direction to go, because first of all, one, we appropriated money for the University of Kentucky to do research on this. Their research will be back before a constitutional amendment could even go on the ballot in November of 2024. I think we'll have some definitive answers from individuals like Dr. Walsh and people like that who have been at Johns Hopkins and done this types of study, who the NIH, National Institute of Health, has given $80 million over 4 years to look at the opioid problem. They'll come back within the next year with, here's what we think we have found, this is what we think it could be used for or not used for.